get to decide what kind of king you are going to be.
Hola, comrades. Today's topic of interest, Black Panther. Gonna get this out of the way first and foremost. This film is awesome. That may not be the most critically analytical thing to say, but as a critic I have to be above all open and honest. And that is the most honest and open truth I know. This is an astounding piece of cinema that breathes life into a stolid, derelict Marvel framework. From the aesthetic, to the direction, to the narrative, to the character writing, this is one of the sharpest superhero films I have ever seen. If you haven't seen it already, do yourself a favor and go change that. But I probably don't need to tell you. If you're watching this video, you've most likely seen the film. You might have even seen it 2 or 3 times. As of writing this film has had the 5th best opening weekend ever in America. It pulled in over $200 million, and unlike other films with big opening weekends, it's not dropping like a rock. In its second weekend, it grossed over $100 million. What's more, people are actually talking about it. And I don't mean just the "dude, that was so badass" platitudes that accompany the release of every successful superhero movie. I mean actual, intelligent discussion and analysis of the film's themes. Back at the beginning of the year, when buzz for the film was still gathering, I suspected it would become a major cultural touchstone, and I was absolutely right. Much of the acclaim and analysis has focused on the villain, Killmonger, which is exceedingly odd for a Marvel movie. Quick, how many Marvel villains can you name off the top of your head? Okay, now how many can you name other than Loki? Exactly. Most Marvel movies have these bland, one-dimensional, cardboard cutout villains that bring absolutely nothing to the table. They're not morally ambiguous, or deep. I wouldn't even compare them favorably to James Bond villains, because at least James Bond villains have flavor and personality and an interesting backstory. While there have been a litany of complaints filed at Marvel movies since they became so pervasive, many of them smart and cutting, such as complaints about the franchise's overuse of comedy and its unimaginative, overly triumphal musical score, there has been no criticism more commonly voiced than that the villains add absolutely nothing to the films they're in. That cannot be said of Killmonger, the first villain in the MCU that not only invites sympathy, but makes a genuine critique of the hero and the world of the film. That does not necessarily mean he's right, but that this is a question people have been debating means director Ryan Coogler has done something tremendously interesting. Killmonger criticizes Wakanda for hoarding all its technological progress and cutting itself off from the outside world instead of using that power to help those suffering from the legacy of slavery and the African diaspora. This is far removed from the typical Marvel villain's plan of taking over the world and ruling it with an iron fist. This dissonance has confused some parts of the general audience, who have been served the same tasteless meal for so long by our corporate overlords that they don't know what to do with more sumptuous fare. To those who believe this film having a villain who has a legitimate case for being right is a weakness, well... I usually refrain from making fun of people, but yeah. I'm ambivalent on the whole concept of having dedicated villains in stories, but if you are going to have villains, make them interesting. Make them thoughtful, even reasonable. Offer them as the ideological opposite of your main character. Give them an actual system of beliefs. Let them have something to teach the hero. We need more films with villains like Killmonger. However, this is not the first time I've happened upon villains like him. And no, I do not mean the Joker in The Dark Knight. While the Joker is a great villain, and Batman's ideological opposite, he's never more than a mere villain, in keeping in line with the reactionary, Bush-era worldview of that otherwise stellar film. What I'm referring to are the villains in The Legend of Korra, and it is those that I wish to discuss. Sage Hyden at just right made a passing reference to this on his great video on Black Panther, which I will link to in the description, but I would like to go more in depth. For the unaware, The Legend of Korra is the follow-up to the highly acclaimed, absolutely beloved, and utterly phenomenal 2005 animated series Avatar: The Last Airbender. The majority of the Avatar fandom views Korra as good overall, but a significant drop-off from the heights of the first show. This is short-sighted and narrow-minded. Korra is not only better than Avatar, it is one of the best shows ever made. Right up there with Breaking Bad and Mad Men. I love Avatar. It's earnest and thoughtful and empathetic. It's flush with enough hope that it would be annoying if it weren't so all utterly deserved and earned. It never falls back on simplistic stereotypes about the world, and it never takes the easy way out. But Korra, despite having a far weaker supporting cast, is a stronger show because of its stronger lead, and its much more compelling narrative, which is less about defeating one big bad, and more about creating a new, modern world out of the decaying wreckage of the old, then defending that new world against opposing forces both reactionary and radical. But the number one reason why Korra surpasses Avatar is its stable of villains. Ozai, the main villain of Avatar, is a typical evil overlord from the perspective of Aang. From the perspective of his son Zuko, he's something much darker and more interesting, but Zuko has already had his confrontation with Ozai by series' end. There's no compelling dynamic between Aang and Ozai. They don't have a pre-existing relationship, and Ozai does not have an actual well-defined ideology, so the fight between them at the end lacks punch. Ozai, as viewed in relation to Aang, is basically a better, more thought-out version of your typical Marvel Cinematic Universe villain. Korra is different. Korra at the beginning of the series is a naive young girl who wants to change the world for the better and put it back in balance. The politics of the show are fascinating, and I'd read a long book analyzing them, but to state it simply, she has to defeat, over the course of the series, 4 extremists. 4 Killmongers, if you will. And like Killmonger, each of them has an actual coherent ideology. Amon is a communist, Unalaq is a religious fundamentalist, Kuvira is a fascist, and Zahir, the villain Killmonger resembles the most in terms of both complexity and actually having a genuine critique of society, is an anarchist. This would appear to place Korra, as the protagonist, in the role of moderate, but that's not entirely accurate. When I think of a moderate, I think of a defender of the status quo, which Korra absolutely is not. She's not this weak-kneed, easily folding sycophant, but rather a bold and brash young woman with a unique vision for the world. She does not want to hold up the old system. She's more of a reformer than a revolutionary, but she does not back away from revolution. She steps toward it, and she's more than willing to deal with the consequences. Over the course of the series, she arguably does more to transform the world than any other Avatar ever, and her legacy is more lasting than that of any of her adversaries. She brings back the Air Nation and reconnects the human and spirit worlds, 2 decisions which radically alter the fabric of her world and realign the political landscape. For this reason, calling her a mere moderate reformer is short-sighted. And while she accomplishes more than the adversaries she defeats, her accomplishments are tinged with the ideals of her adversaries. This she shares with T'Challa, who responds to the threat posed by Killmonger by defeating him, but who responds to the ideas of Killmonger by opening up Wakanda. Because of Amon, the entire political system of Republic City is reformed, being transformed from this shadowy elitist council of benders to a more representative system with the president, a non-bender, elected directly by the people. Because of Unalaq, Korra decides to reconnect the human and spirit worlds. Because of Kuvira, who is intended as a shadow of Korra, being of roughly the same age and height and exhibiting a similar personality, measures are taken to stabilize and modernize the Earth Kingdom, with Wu pledging to step down and turn his country into a republic. Because of Zahir, the Earth Kingdom collapses, starting the process that would eventually lead to its democratization. a process that would have occurred much sooner had Korra been able to intervene in the reconstruction. The 4 villains also help Korra personally. Without Amon, she would not have unlocked airbending when she did. Without Unalaq, she would not have gotten in touch with the spirits. Without Kuvira, she would not have demonstrated the empathy she developed through enduring 3 long, arduous years of hardships, starting when Zahir poisoned her at the end of Season 3. Her gesture to Kuvira at the end of Season 4, combined with her refusal to charge blindly into battle with Kuvira in the middle of the season, secure her character growth.
Why would you save my life? After everything I did to you?
I guess I see a lot of myself in you.
We are nothing alike.
Yes, we are. We're both fierce and determined to succeed, sometimes without thinking things through.
This wasn't how I wanted things to end. If you had all just surrendered, none of this would have happened.
You brought this on yourself. Messing with the spirit vines, acting like a dictator over your people. You had to know what you were doing wasn't right.
I was trying to help my people. Sue turned her back on the Earth Kingdom. You were gone. I had to do something.
I think I get it now.
You don't understand anything about me.
I do. Sue told me how she took you in when you were younger. It must have been so hard being an orphan.
Don't pretend you know what it felt like. The Avatar is adored by millions. I was cast aside by my own parents like I meant nothing to them. How could I just stand by and watch the same thing happen to my nation when it needed someone to guide it?
You wanted to create a place where you and your people would never be vulnerable again. I may not have been an orphan, but believe me, I understand what it feels like to be afraid. After I was poisoned, I would have done anything to feel in control.
However, it is Zahir who helps her the most. He is the only villain to actually give Korra advice person to person. Despite the ideological differences between them, they have a common enemy in the fascist Kuvira, so he offers her guidance as she works past the last mental blockade keeping her from the spirit world. That she has to accept help from the person who inflicted her with the trauma that requires her to need help is perverse at first glance, but it marks a significant milestone in her character arc. Earlier, when she refused to comply with Suyin Beifong's personal vendetta against Kuvira, she demonstrated a willingness to break from the desires of her allies if they would throw the world into chaos. With Zahir, then, she demonstrates the opposite, a willingness to receive help from her enemies if it would help her restore balance.
I think I can help. Let me lead you into the spirit world.
No way. I can't trust you.
Maybe not. But if you had any other options, you wouldn't be here now, would you? We may have been enemies once, but for now, our interests align.
I've come this far. What have I got to lose?
Focus on the sound of my voice and clear your mind. Let it play out.
I can't!
You can. Accept what happened to you. Don't fear what might have been.
I have no control!
Don't be afraid. Hold on.
The scene in which she accepts Zahir's aid, after a long and heated dialogue between the two, is my favorite scene in the entire series, and by the end of it, Korra has demonstrated that she is a radically different avatar from the brash kid who responded to an anti-bending rally that she encountered on her first day in Republic City by shouting, "You're oppressing yourselves!" at the protesters. Aside from Unalaq's ideas leading her to leave open the portals, none of Korra's adversaries directly lead to her making a concrete change in policy in the same way that Killmonger's ideas directly lead T'Challa to opening up Wakanda, but they do lead her to maturing as a person and an avatar. This is what happens when your villain isn't a cardboard cutout baddie. The protagonist has to place not only their fists and wits, but their actual ideals against those of the antagonist, and through that conflict, the work becomes a thoughtful rumination on philosophy without sacrificing any of its narrative momentum. In fact, These sorts of conflicts help the narrative. Characterization is not independent of conflict, but intimately tied to it. Battles don't have to be these empty, CGI-filled slogs devoid of purpose. They can mean something ideologically. The victory of one side over another can thus become, in the hands of a talented artiste, not a case of might making right, but of one ideology triumphing over another because of the positives of that ideology and the negatives of the other ideology. It results in much more interesting and engaging art, which is odd because it's not that hard to pull off. Just give your heroes an ideological position beyond being good, and give your villains an ideological position beyond being evil, and you're set. You still need proper characterization and dialogue and development and pacing, but all of those things become much easier when the structure of your work is sound. What I'm saying is that both Black Panther and The Legend of Korra prove that while the old adage that the work is only as good as its villain is an exaggeration, there is a need to have an engaging, thoughtful, genuinely imposing force opposite the protagonist. It doesn't need to be a single person. It can be systematic, or it can be internal, but it needs to be more than a stumbling block for the hero. It needs to be a well-defined force that has its own weight and a nuance. This is what takes a work from merely good to truly memorable. If most Marvel movies were half this good, I wouldn't mind the onslaught of them that we have been subjected to for the last decade. Do you think the next Avengers movie is going to be about anything this fascinating? No. It's going to be one of those overblown, melodramatic, 3-hour blockbusters that promises to be a transcendent piece of cinema, but ends up throwing a lot of flashy action scenes and narrative cliches up in the air, and then just looking away and letting them fall as they will, and thus leaving me feeling cold as I walk out of the theater. It'll make a ton of money, don't get me wrong, and the Disney execs will chuckle as they bathe in their stack of bills, but no one will remember it within 5 years. I hate what the AAA cinematic landscape has become, but whatever. I just hope Disney uses all that money to give us more films like Black Panther. Anyway, if you liked what you saw today, consider donating to my Patreon so I can produce even more synthesizing content. Also, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all that Korra-rific stuff. Adios, comrades!